Russell Hayes.
And Carmen Hayes.
And this is our story about our journey out of Mormonism to find grace in Jesus Christ. When I was an active Mormon, when I would see or hear people talk about coming out of Mormonism, I always thought that was just anti-Mormonism. I just thought that these people were deceived. And I think all Mormons have what you'd call a back shelf of questions that they've asked themselves. And maybe they've even voiced it to other Mormons. But what happens a lot of times is you don't find an answer. So you end up just proverbially putting in the back of your mind, or my back shelf as I like to call it. And a little bit of history. My family joined the Mormon Church back in Massachusetts. And my grandmother joined about the same time as my mom and dad. And I've got eight, I'm the oldest of eight. And it's been quite an incredible journey. When I was a young Mormon, I was very enthusiastic. I loved the church. And being in Massachusetts, my family were the only Mormons around. And we took to heart the part where it said, every member a missionary. And so we talked to all of our neighbors. I asked my friends that I hung out with, what religion they were, and they said that they were Protestants. At the time I thought I was being clever. I said, "What are you protesting?" And eventually, in the street that we lived on, we had another family that left Catholicism to become Mormons. And I absolutely loved and adored the missionaries. The missionaries that came to talk to us, and of course after we joined the church, my parents had the missionaries over once a week, and we fed them, and I just looked up to them and adored them and thought that they were just fantastic men, and I wanted to be like them. Eventually I got to put in my paperwork to go on a mission. I was called to the Western State Spanish Mission. I served in California. And while I was in California, real quick story about this beautiful woman sitting next to me. I transferred into the Fresno, California area where my wife is from. And as Spanish missionaries, we would go to the Spanish branches or wards or whatever. And in Fresno, we went to this one ward, and when we got there a little bit late, but the room was so crowded that it was standing room only. So my companion and I are standing against the wall, and I just was looking over the crowd, and I saw her sitting in the back. She was already a LDS, and it just came out of my mouth. I looked at her and I said, "She is gorgeous." And of course, my companion poked me in the ribs and he said, "Elder, you're not supposed to be looking at those girls." And I said, "I can't help it, she's gorgeous." And so I had transferred into the area. My companion that was there had been there for a while, and he knew all of the good places to go eat. And in Fresno, there were a lot of Mexican-American restaurants, and there were quite a few of them that were owned by members of the LDS Church. And we got to eat free, one meal a day, in the different Mexican restaurants. I fell in love with Mexican food. Carmen will tell her story in a minute, but not to encroach into your story. But her parents had passed away, so she was living with her older sister, and we missionaries found out that her older sister was a fantastic cook. And so we started planning our days around somehow ending up over at their house, just at the right time to eat. So it was absolutely wonderful when I served in that area. And after my mission was over, oh, the other thing I was going to tell you, and she'll probably tell you this, at the time period that she was a member of the church, she was engaged to marry a non-member, but she just decided that she wanted to marry a member of the church and a returned missionary. But I left the area, finished my mission thinking, oh, she's probably married. But after my mission, I went back to California. And I was looking for work, and I was hungry one day, and I drove over to her sister's house, and right at the right time to eat. Of course, her family just knew me as Elder Hayes. And so she prepared me a little meal. I ate, and then her older sister, I asked, well, you know, did Carmen ever marry that guy? And she said, no, they broke up. And I said, well, where's she living now? And so they told me that she was over staying with some members of the church in Fresno. And I got her number, called her up, invited her out, and she answered the door when I went to pick her up to go take her bowling. And she looks at me, first thing she said is a big, beautiful smile on her face. She says, hello, Elder Hayes. And I said, you don't have to call me Elder anymore. Then I took her bowling, and she beat me. Much better athlete than I am. And so that was our first date. A week later, they were having a fireside. And for those that aren't Mormons, about once a month, the church would get the youth together and have like a fireside chat. And so I invited her, let's go to the fireside chat. And so we went there, and we've only been on one date so far, so this wasn't technically a date going to the fireside church activity. And while we were there, you know, of course, I'm not even listening to the guy talking. I'm just thinking about this gorgeous girl next to me. And so anyway, the meeting ended, and then there was another returned missionary there. What was his first name?
Hector.
Hector Hernandez. And so she gets out, and she's going out with out the door with some other girls. And Hector leans over to me, and he says, is that your girlfriend? And I said, no, I couldn't claim her as my girlfriend yet. And he goes, and by this time we've stood up, and he goes, good. And he pushes me out of the way, and he goes out to my car, and she's sitting in the passenger side of my car. And while I'm standing there, he stuck his head in my door and asked her out. And you said?
Yes.
So I have competition right away, and you guys can see who won. Anyway, what Hector did, he was too aggressive, too hungry, and so I kind of backed off, and I said, she's going to see this. And fortunately she did. He was probably calling you every day or quite a bit.
Too pushy.
Yeah, too pushy. I waited a week or so, and then I asked her out again. She said yes. And I don't remember what the second date was. I was just so happy to be going out with this gorgeous girl. So we dated for about 9 months, and we were at her sister's house sitting on the couch, and I asked her, I said, is it your goal to get married at the temple? She says, yes, that's my goal. And then I said, mine too. And I asked her, will you marry me? And she says, we were all wondering when you were going to finally ask. So we got up off the couch and went to her older sister's bedroom and knocked on the door. And she kind of says, what? What do you guys want? And so Carmen walks in there and turns on the light. And her sister says, turn off the light. What are you doing? And she says, this is important. And she told her sister that I had asked her to marry me. And her sister looks at me and says, yeah, we've all been wondering when you're going to ask, but it takes you so long. So June 26th of 1975, we were married in the Oakland Temple in Oakland, California. And I've got to tell you that at that time, when I saw her in the temple, all dressed in white, I was overcome by how beautiful she looked, and I also had this wonderful feeling inside me that, because I believed in the Book of Mormon at the time, that I'm marrying a Lamanite, and it was a very, very special time for me. Did you want to catch us up on your side up to that point, our marriage?
Well, we got married.
Well, no, I'm
What,
telling
like-
how your family got converted.
Oh, how, okay,
So, yeah, because I told how mine.
yeah. So, my family and I joined when I was 17. Missionaries came to our door, and my sister let them in, and they
Fed 'em.
Oh, we fed them, and then they asked if they could come back again and start giving us the missionary lessons, and she said yes, and so and that's how we started, and we accepted it, and we joined the church. And been a member, very, very active, strong members. Let's see, I had callings in the church. I mean, we did everything that was asked of us, everything that was required of us, we did.
That was also back in the days when
Oh yes.
they had priesthood in the morning.
The service was twice a week, on Sundays. And my family and I, we lived about 40 minutes away from church. So we would go home, have lunch, go back again. When they finally changed it, we were so relieved. But there was times where we would pack a lunch so that after church, we just go to the park and eat and then go back to church, let's see what else. So when my husband and I got married, we continued in the church. We were so strong, and we raised our 6 kids in the church, and we did a good job. They are still in the church, very strong, very much strong in the church, every one of them. We did everything, and
Yeah, we were, as she said, we were very strong and active in the church. Going back to 1975 when we got married, Carmen indicated to me, that she wanted us to have a family right away. And when we took her to the doctor, she had never had measles. And so they had to inject her with rubella, I forget exactly what it was. And then the doctor said, you can't get pregnant now for a year. So we waited for that time to be able to have a child. And so we had our first child in 1977. And just to tell you real quick, that led to a total that we had 6 children. And of the 6 children, they were all boys, except for 5 of them. But our son is the oldest, and we did all we could as we had each one of our children. They were blessed in the church and baptized at 8. I baptized them, and we had family prayer every morning and family prayer at night, and we had family home evenings. And as she said, we did all we could to raise our children as good Mormons. And to the point that we also told them, don't listen to any of the anti-Mormon stuff. that that it was, poison. And 4 of our 6 children have gone on missions. Our son went to McAllen, Texas. We had a daughter that was called to Fresno, California, where she's from. And while she was a missionary, she'd go over to her aunt's house and eat all the time, just like I used to when I was a missionary. And our next daughter went to Boston, the area that I grew up in. And yes, I used to have a very strong Bostonian accent. I used to say, "Park the car and have it yard and come here, and Junior, it's time for supper." But I got picked on for that accent so hard when I moved out west that I used to get in front of the mirror and practice saying my R's. I'd say hard and car when I used to say hard and car. And our next daughter went to Tempe, Arizona. Is that 4? Mm-hmm. Okay. Our next to the last daughter, her mission was she got married and started having babies, to make us grandparents. So, I just want to share with you guys real quick too a miracle that happened to us. After Carmen and I had 5 children, she came to me and she said, "That's it, I don't want any more children. I want my tubes tied." And I said, "Okay." So she's being wheeled into the operating room to have her tubes tied, and she breaks out crying. And the nurse says, "What's the matter, honey?" And she looks at me, she goes, "I want another baby. I've been waiting for you to talk me out of this." And I said, "Honey, I'm a man. I don't read minds." So the nurse said, "What?" And so they took all the IVs out and sent us home. And she had been having dreams about another baby. And I think you even in a dream saw...
It wasn't a dream, it was real.
Okay. I'll let you tell that part. But anyway, we went home, and our kids kept telling us, have another baby, and I kept telling them, no, we're too old. We can't have any more babies. And so we tried for 13 years to have another baby. And at the time, I was in federal law enforcement, and we were in Puerto Rico at the time. So anyway, we went on a church trip, and I think it was when Gordon B. Hinckley went to Puerto Rico. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so as the ward from the west side of the island went all the way to San Juan, we got stuck on a bus that the shocks weren't very good, so every bump we were just going like this, and the bus is going up and down. When we got back, Carmen says, "Oh, I don't feel so good." And I says, "It's just the bus trip." And a couple days later, she says, "I still don't feel good." And I jokingly said, "Oh, maybe you're pregnant." And she goes, "You think?" So she sent me to the pharmacy to pick up the test kit, brought it home, and she brought it out to me from the bathroom. She says, "What does the plus sign mean?" I said, "Honey, it means you're pregnant." And she said, "Oh, go back to the pharmacy, get me another test kit. I want to verify it." So I went back to the pharmacy. Fortunately, it wasn't that far away. Brought it back, and that tested positive. By then, our kids came home from school, and Carmen showed it to our daughters that it was positive, and our oldest daughter got all excited, and she says, "Dad, go back and get another kit." So we tested 5 times that day with a plus every time. Now, by this time, we're in our late 40s, and the pregnancy was going along, but something wasn't quite right. We went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Because of your ages, there's a high likelihood that this child will be born with Down syndrome." And then the next words out of his mouth was, we need to do an amniocentesis so we can make our decision. And at that point, I see her kind of come up like this, and she says, make our decision? She told the doctor, I don't care if there's anything wrong with my baby. I'm not going to kill my baby. Then she looked at me and says, I want a new doctor. I said, okay, you're fired. So what happened next was when Carmen was 6 months pregnant, her water broke. And when the water broke, we rushed to the hospital, and the doctor examined her, and then he comes to talk to both of us. He says, well, at 6 months, this baby's not going to survive. It's not fully developed. And he's starting to explain the process that he's going to take the baby, basically a late-term abortion. And, we're all crying now. Our other kids are crying. I'm crying. She's crying. And this thought came to my mind. I just said, Doc, is there anything you can do to hold off the delivery of this baby? And he was kind of like, that I'd interrupted his speech. And he goes, all right, look. He says, if she has 9 milliliters left of amniotic fluid, I'll give you 2 weeks. So, but she's got to stay in the hospital and can't move, can't get out of bed, can't do anything. So those 2 weeks went by, and they brought in the mobile sonogram test again. And he came in after those 2 weeks. He says, well, this has been a miracle. She's up to normal levels of amniotic fluid. And so she laid in that hospital bed for 2 months. Never got up once. Her muscles atrophied. Everything that happens to you, bed sores, the whole bit. But she was bound and determined to save and I just revealed it, our baby. We had a beautiful baby girl that was born with dwarfism, achondroplasia. And so I didn't understand that at that time. I thought, oh, dwarfs, aren't they just born to other dwarfs? And we found out later, of course, that most dwarfs are born to average-sized parents. But she's been a blessing in our life, changed our life completely, because her next oldest sibling is 13 years older than her. And she's now 20 years old and very, very smart and independent. And we've been blessed to have her. But truly, Carmen saved our daughter's life.
And I remind her every day.
Yeah. But I guess continuing then with our journey, I want to back to when I was on my mission, where I said that people that don't understand things in the Mormon Church put them on their back shelf in their mind. On my back shelf was the first time, well, the missionary that baptized me also was the one that took me to the temple when I went on my mission. And as we were leaving the temple, I had questions, and so I started to ask a question, and he stopped me mid-sentence. And he said, stop right there. He says, we don't talk of anything about the temple outside of the temple. If you had a question, you should have asked me while we're still in there. So I had a question about blood atonement that they practiced inside the temple, or, the symbolism of it, for those that don't understand that. And so I went through my 2 years of mission.
Can you explain that a little more?
What's that?
Can you explain that a little more?
In the temple, in the Mormon Church, there was a ceremony, a thing that you have certain handshakes and what they call signs and tokens that you do. And there are penalties if you ever reveal it. We used to have to raise our hand and swear before God and angels that we would never reveal that token of the priesthood. And the penalty of it was, if I should do so, I would suffer my life to be taken. And that just was a big thing on my back shelf. I was thinking, am I supposed to kill myself, or is someone going to kill me if I reveal this secret? And so it was a dark time for me, but I put it on my back shelf. I said, well, if I don't understand it in this life, I'll understand it in the next. the next thing that happened was when I was on my mission, we were teaching this a U.S. Air Force pilot in Castle Air Force Base in California, and he was an African American, lovely, fantastic man. He was married and he had 2 daughters, and we were teaching him, and I really enjoyed the family. And we were about to get to the lesson where we were going to challenge the whole family to be baptized to become Mormons. And apparently someone at his work told him, you know, because you're black, that you can't hold the priesthood in the Mormon church, and you can't take your family to the temple, and you can't be sealed, and all those things. So my companion and I walked in there. He took our coats because it was wintertime in California, which is tule fog, if you've ever, it's a cold, thick, wet fog. And he said, before we begin, he asked me, looked me straight in the eyes, and he said, is it true that if we become Mormons and are baptized in your church, that I can never hold the priesthood and I can never take my wife and children to the temple? And it was like a gut punch to me, and I had to look at him and say, yes, that's true. Because this is 1971 and blacks could not hold the priesthood. And so, lovely man, he just stood up, handed us our coats, and he said, gentlemen, there will be no more lessons. And sent us all on our way. That weighed heavy on my mind and my back shelf. And of course, the part where I told you that when I came back off my mission and we got married, that put me back in euphoria and back in love with the Mormon church again. And over the years, though, other things started going on to my back shelf. And I ended up with 4 issues. Oh, and by the way, during this time that we were raising our children, I had been in 2 bishoprics. I had been a second counselor. I didn't get it right the first time, so they called me back a second time. But we were very active, home teaching, visiting teaching, going to the temple. We did all the things that good Mormons are supposed to do. But it was 2.5 years ago that I went to my bishop with 4 issues. And that was the Book of Abraham, it was my wife's DNA, it was polygamy, and Freemasonry. Those were the 4 issues. And to come up and fill you in a little bit more background of that in my 4 issues, one of the things that we do in Mormonism is you do your genealogy. And so when I was doing my genealogy, I found that on the Hayes side, back in Massachusetts, where I was raised and from, that part of our ancestors were Jewish. And so I started to study with a rabbi. And I studied for 2 years with this rabbi, and I fell in love with Judaism. And so I went through the conversion process to become a Jew while I was still a Mormon. And so I did that, and the whole time it's adding more to my back shelf. But what brought me to the first issue of the Book of Abraham was in my studying of Judaism, I looked for everything I could find on Abraham, the father of the Jews. And while I was on YouTube one time, I saw this thing that said the Lost Book of Abraham. And I went, the Book of Abraham's not lost. I got a copy here in my quad. And but I clicked on it and I watched it. And in those 56 minutes, the whole house of cards came tumbling down. And I knew then that the Mormon church was false and man-made. The Book of Abraham is the smoking gun that showed that Joseph Smith lied. And I was devastated at that point. And looked at that, but that started peeling the onion back, and that's when I started investigating all the different things about Mormonism, and and I think everybody that has come out of Mormonism has one issue that's the catalyst, but it brings you to the same conclusion every time, and that is that Mormonism is a man-made religion. And if I can add in here, I don't hate Mormons. I love them. Most all of my family are Mormons. I love them. But it is, the facts were staring me in the face, and I couldn't unsee what I saw. At the end of the Lost Book of Abraham video, the narrator says, if Joseph Smith lied about this, what else did he lie about? And that's another tumbling down on me, was the Book of Mormon. Here I am, proud father of the father of Lamanite children and the husband to a Lamanite woman. And so a few days later, I were in our bedroom, and I was on the computer, and I looked over at Carmen, and I said, hey, honey, would you be willing to do a DNA test? And she looked at me, and she says, absolutely not. And she knew what I was getting at. So I was already on 23andMe, and so I ordered 2 kits anyway. And when the kits came, I was giving my sample for my DNA, and she was sitting over there watching me, and I says, aren't you the least bit curious? And she goes, oh, all right. And so she submitted her test for DNA. And when it came back, you know, part of me was hoping that she would be part Jewish, because in the Book of Mormon, the Lamanites came from the Jews. So they should all have Jewish DNA. And when that came back negative, what it came back is that she is 65% Native American, 30% Spanish, and 5% French. And the DNA that showed that she was Native American showed that the DNA markers came from the Bering Strait, from Eastern Asia and Siberia. And so now I've got my second issue, which is my wife's DNA. And then my third issue, polygamy, had been sitting on my back shelf for 40, 50 years, you know, as long as I could remember. And then I'd heard rumors that the temple ceremony in the Mormon Church was a copy of the Freemasons. So I'm still on my investigative process here. So I went to the Freemason temple, and I asked to become a member. And so you remember that night, the 2 guys from the Freemasons came to the house, they interviewed me, and then they set up my date for when I was to go in for the initiatory to become a Freemason. And so when I got there, they put me in this changing room, and they had me put on a garment. And as I looked at that garment, it was the same markings as the one in the Mormon temple. It was tie-up instead of zipper. And so when I had that on, they took me to the door to go into their temple part, and the guy had a little hammer, and he knocked on the door 3 times. And someone on the other side said, what is wanted? And these are things I'm going, oh my gosh, this is just like the Mormon temple ceremony. Then they took me through and came to the part of the ceremony to receive my first sign and token. And it was the exact same thing as in the Mormon temple. And, you know, my fellow Freemasons there, I didn't react at that time, but inside I was boiling. And so when I got home that night, she looked at me and she goes, so, well, what was it? What did you do? And I said, well, honey, you've been to the temple. You know. And I said, it's not exactly the same, but it's pretty darn close. So that was my 4th issue. Then I went to my bishop with I set up an appointment went with my 4 issues. Carmen went with me, and I sat there, and I presented the 4 issues to the bishop. The bishop wrote them down diligently. Then he looks at me and he says, "Hey, can you come back in a month?" And I said, "Sure." And I figured, okay, he's going to look up my issues. And he says, "In the meantime, go home and read the Book of Mormon." Remember, said that? And so I did give him a month. I tried to read the Book of Mormon, but by this point, it had all crumbled down. I couldn't get myself to read it. And when I went back a month later, he had the stake president in the office. And the bishop says, "Could you present your issues to the stake president?" So I did. I told him my 4 issues also. And honey, what was the stake president's, what did he tell me to go do?
Go home and read the Book of Mormon.
And out of respect for both of them, I said, okay. And we left, and I went home that night, and I was angry at that point. And I sat down there, and I typed out my letter of resignation. And that next day was Monday. I took my letter of resignation to my bishop's house, and I handed it to him. I said, "No more delays, submit this." And I came out angry. I said things that were hurtful and wrong. I shouldn't have done. I was not a Christian yet. I just knew that the Mormon Church was a man-made religion, and I felt that I'd been duped, and I was angry about it. And I'm going to say, compare this, the way I felt, was probably how those, you've all heard of Bernie Madoff, the guy that took the life savings of a lot of people. I felt that I had taken all my spiritual salvation investments into the Mormon Church, and they were gone. So I was angry, and I thought in my mind, okay, well, I'm just going to. I'd already converted to Judaism. I'll just be a Jew, married to a Mormon, and but I still had questions. And what happened was Carmen asked me to drive her and our daughter, our youngest daughter, down to Education Week at BYU. And in the meantime, I had found out about Dave Bartosowitz and his site that says, "Have you experienced Jesus?" So I called him up, and he says, "I'll come by the house." So I dropped her and our daughter off at Education Week, and they were going to stay down there. And as I was driving back to Idaho, I stopped in at Dave Bartosowitz's house. And Dave Bartosowitz sat me down at his table there, and he got out his scriptures. And, you know, at this point, I'd never read the Bible. And here are his scriptures, red letter, not like my quad. And he had them all marked up in all these scriptures, and he walked me through Romans. He walked me through my favorite scripture, Ephesians 2:8-9, that we're saved by grace, not by works. And he just opened my mind to it. And then he gave me the challenge. He said, "Russell, will you, now that you see the gospel here, recognize that you are a sinner and you need Jesus in your life? And will you accept him as your personal Savior?" And in his living room that night, I accepted Jesus as my personal Savior. And I was converted at that point, and I saw that I am saved because of what Jesus did and not by my works. And I was elated. I drove back to Idaho that night, but before I left, he told me, he says, "Now that you belong to Jesus," he says, "there's no such thing as a true church. The true church is you and Jesus. Where you worship now is where you're comfortable." And so I get home, and I'm now a brand new Christian, and she's still a Mormon. And the first church that I tried out was a Pentecostal church, and being from a Mormon background, I just was kind of going, okay, I'm not so comfortable here. But I'm not knocking Pentecostals, because if that's where they're comfortable and they're with Jesus, perfectly fine. The next week I tried a mega church with lots and lots of people, and I felt lost in there. And then I drove past this small little church called Anchor Baptist Church, and they had a telephone number. I pulled in their parking lot, and I called up the number. Well, the pastor answered, and I said, hey, I'm just came out of Mormonism. I'm a brand new Christian, and he said, love to have you, and I've been praying for the past 30 years that I've been a minister in the Treasure Valley of a Mormon coming to my church. And then, of course, a week later he repented. He says, Gordon, that wasn't the Mormon I wanted. No, we get along great. And it's just 50 people. And during this time period, when I came out angry out of the Mormon church, and I was going through all the things that I saw on the internet that showed the truth about Mormonism, I kept trying to show Carmen. I said, look at this. And still in my angry stage. And then, do you want to jump in there? What you told me?
So, before he did come out of Mormonism, he said, how do you feel if I come out of Mormon church? I said, well, it's... Of course I thought, oh my gosh, what's going on? And so, I said, well, you're an adult, you're a grown man, you know what you're doing. I hope you know what you're doing. And I said, but do not talk to me about anything. What you read, what you saw, whatever it is, don't talk to me. And I'm happy where I am, you know. And he said, okay. But he couldn't help himself. He still kept on, you know.
All right, skip that part.
Yeah. And I said, no. I said, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to see anything. You know, just, and so he kept on. And at nighttime, we lay in the bed, and he whispered, you know, those things. You know, and one day he said, what are you waiting for? You want God to come down and tell you himself? I said, yes, that's what I'm going to wait for. And so one day I finally said, you know what? Oh, because we were going, they're a hard time with their kids after he left.
They're very mad at me.
Very, and they kept telling him, you've broken our family, you know? And so they would talk to me and say, oh, I don't know, you know, Mom, Dad, something's wrong with that, you know? And so I knew that there couldn't possibly be a divorce here, you know? Because we've heard so many stories and met people, couples, that either the wife leaves, the husband leaves because one leaves the church, you know? And so I thought, okay, instead of doing that, I told him, I'm just gonna, if I ever leave the Mormon church, it's gonna be because I myself found out that the Mormon church is not true. Not because you're telling me, or the things that you're showing me, or anyone else, it's because I found out myself. But, so, in the Mormon church, you know, we are not encouraged to read the Bible. And the reason for not reading the Bible for me was I never did understand the Bible, and because we were never encouraged to. So,
Go ahead.
So one day I took the Bible the first time, and I took it in.
If I can interject in here, when she said she didn't understand the Bible, I didn't either because of all the these and thous. And so I went and brought her home a red letter Bible, NIV, in plain English.
Yeah. So I took it in our spare room, and I had the Book of Mormon, I had the Bible, I had all the scriptures and stuff, and comparing it, you know, here, and
It's off. It's
comparing both and reading it and going back and forth. The part where in the scripture it says you are saved by grace, period, you know. And in the Book of Mormon, where Joseph Smith wrote, you are saved by grace after all you can do. And I thought, okay, so we have Christ in here, you're saved by grace, period. And then I took that to my bishop, and I said, I will never do enough to make it back. I said, never. I said, there's so much to do, there's no way, you know. And I haven't even started in my genealogy work. I haven't even begun to do that, let alone everything else, you know. And he said, oh, don't worry about it, you know. Whatever you don't do, you can, you know, Christ will take care of it. He will finish the rest. Well, I thought that was wonderful. I was great, okay. But as I continue reading the Bible, no, Christ is not going to do the rest because he's already done it all. There's nothing left for him to do, you know. And at first I had a hard time with that when because he already had come out and read, you know. And I told him, you know, I said, there must be something we need to do. We can't just not do nothing, you know. There's something that we have to do to make it back. And so I continued to read the scriptures, and and before I started reading the Bible too, because I started with the prayer, and I didn't ask, is Joseph Smith, is he a true prophet, or is the Book of Mormon true? I didn't ask any of that. I just wanted to know the truth. Anyway, I said, I just want to know your truth. What do you have for me? And as I continued reading, I was looking on prophets, you know, and the thought just came to me. A true prophet or a false prophet will tell you what you want to hear. A true prophet will tell you what you need to hear. And I thought, oh wow. And this is what, one of the many things revealed to me. I thought, okay, so the prophet that we have today has been telling us things that we want to hear, you know? Who doesn't want to hear about families being together forever, being married in the temple forever, you know, and all these other wonderful things that the church has to offer, except for the true gospel. And as I continue reading more, as we are taught in the Mormon church, Jesus Christ is our older brother. And then as I read in the Bible, when Christ says, someone comes to him and tells Christ, I have...
Show us the Father.
No, oh yeah, that's another one. Someone came to Jesus Christ and said, I've taught in your name, I've cast evil spirits in your name, I've done all these things in your name, you know. And Christ tells him, I never knew you. And I thought, all these works mean nothing to him. All this work that is required of us in the Mormon church is nothing but filthy rags to him, because that's not what he's asking of us. And the next thing that he says too, as Jesus Christ is walking with his disciples, and one of them asks him, just show us the Father, and we will be satisfied. And Jesus Christ turns to them and says, haven't I been with you all this time, and yet you still don't know who I am? And when I read that, so I read it again. And then finally, I thought, oh my gosh, he is God. Jesus Christ is God himself. Never knew that. And the other time he mentions that he is God. That's in John 1. In the beginning is the Word, and then the next verse says that he became flesh and dwelt among men. I thought, oh my gosh, there he is again. And so it just went on and on after, and then to hear that he says, there's only one God, always has been, always will be. There's no other gods before me or after me, but yet we were always taught that we were going to become gods ourselves. Well, that was kind of exciting at first. I get to have my own world and do with what I want with it, but anyway.
She told me that when she became God of her own world, that she wasn't going to allow anybody to sleep. To waste the time.
Waste the time. But it's just one scripture after another, and as I continued reading, I felt I could see what I didn't see before. It was like the scales were just falling off my eyes, And I said, oh, why didn't I know this before, And now, one of the questions that I usually ask, and I asked the bishop too, if the temple, is that sacred? Because we've always been taught it's so sacred, you can't talk about it. If it's so sacred, what? No, one of the things too, has God ever needed Satan's help? And they have to stop and think, So, when has God ever needed Satan's help? And he says, no. I said, so if the temple is that sacred, what is he doing in there? And I thought, what do you mean? Well, he's in there. In that video that is shown in the temple, he's in there. And then, at the end of that video, when he turns around and tells the people that if they don't keep every promise, every covenant they've made in that temple that day, they're in his power. And for the years and years that I've been there, never did it ever hit me like it did after I finally came out. And I saw that, and I go, wow, we have been in his power all those years. Because who can keep every promise? Who can keep every covenant? Who can do all these things? No one. And that's fine. I thought, oh my gosh, he was in that temple. And then, as I continue reading the scripture where it says, God does not dwell in man-made temples. I thought, we are his temples. He dwells in us. That's how he communicates with us. And I thought, oh, my gosh, it was just, just unbelievable. I'm like, oh. And yeah, it just opened a whole new world to me.
Thank God.
Yeah, and
It's brought a lot of joy to both of us now that we know the true Jesus. He's so much bigger, more wonderful. And if you don't mind me adding in to your story, a little back, because they're going to want to ask questions. I showed her Jason Kunzler's presentation at BYU, Idaho, in which Jason Kunzler quoted Brigham Young, and I'd never heard of this when I was a Mormon, that no man or woman from this dispensation will go to where God and Jesus are without the consent of Joseph Smith. And she kind of said, what? You know, but she went to the bishop about that, and the bishop says, I don't have an answer, go talk to the stake president. So I drove her to the stake president's office. She went in there, talked to him for about 40 minutes, I think. And I'm out there waiting, what's going on? I'm thinking in my mind, oh my gosh, she's bringing her back into Mormonism. And she walked out of the office, and she started walking past me, just kind of goes like this, and just get to the car. So we get to the car, and I said, well, what's going on? And she says, take me home. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's convinced her to go back to Mormonism. And I let her alone. She was kind of stewing, like, don't talk to me. And then the next day she told me that she asked the stake president about, do we have to have Joseph Smith's consent to go there? And that the stake president held up his hand and said, Jesus is here, and Joseph Smith is here, and Jesus delegated that authority to Joseph Smith to give us consent to go to heaven. And that is highly offensive to me and everybody here, and that's what she was so upset about. Because by this point she knew and believed that when Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one goes to the Father except through him. Did I word it right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
yeah. So that's
That's your story, you're sticking to it?
no, and our kids think, and they blame their dad for, they think that he took me out of the Mormon church, but he did not. God did. God himself, through his scriptures in the Bible, helped me out. Helped me to see the truth.
Now we both love Jesus. Jesus is everything.
Amen. All right, why don't we have some... Yeah, Michelle.
So you mentioned with the birth of your, I think it was your last daughter, and you said that it was a dream, that you said it wasn't a dream, that you had saw something.
Oh,
can you,
yes.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So right before I had gone into the hospital, because I was getting my tubes tied, it was the night before. I had, because we already planned on going to the hospital. I'm walking in my room into the bathroom, and I turn around, and there she was, in white. I knew then, but even then, when I saw her, and then we went to the hospital to do that, and it kept bothering me. Okay, why didn't? And then that's when I said, okay, I can't go through this. He showed it to me, and that's what happened.
But he waited 13 years to deliver that promise.
His timing, yeah.
Yeah.
So my question is, why do why do you believe that Jesus is true as opposed to another fairy tale that you've grown up believing?
You know, when we used to read the Book of Mormon, we were told to read the Book of Mormon, you know, you will get your answers there and stuff. And you will feel it in your bosom. You know, we were always told, you know, you'll get that burning in your bosom. When I started reading the Bible, not once did I ever feel any burning in my bosom, you know. It was totally different. It was like, I just know. It was just something like, just, this is true, you know. I didn't feel anything in my heart. I didn't feel it, and I didn't understand it at first, you know. And yeah, I don't know about you, but that's...
Well, when my family converted to the Mormon Church, we were told by the missionaries to read the Book of Mormon, pray about it, and God will reveal His truth to you through, you'll feel a burning in your bosom. And I've got to tell everybody that I felt that. And when I was on my mission, I would tell people the same thing, and people would come back and say, yeah, I felt the burning in my bosom. And I did not know where it came from. But I remember when I was an early teenager, I knelt down and I prayed. I said, God, did you really appear to Joseph Smith? And I felt that burning in the bosom. I said, oh, it must be true. But I realize now, after reading the Bible, that the heart can deceive you. And it's Satan that uses that burning in the bosom. Like my wonderful wife here, I was reading the Bible along with her. And for the first time myself, from cover to cover. But we started off reading the New Testament. And it rang true to me. I knew that it was true. No burning in the bosom, but I knew the Bible was the true Word of God. And as far as it being you said a fairy tale, it's not. It's really there. And God does reveal it to you, but He reveals it through His Word. His Word is sharper than a two-edged sword, and it does not come back empty-handed. As we read about Jesus, I knew then that He had paid for my sins. I like to say that He paid for my stupidity, because all of my sins were stupid. So.
Question for you. You mentioned when you were marrying her that you looked at her and said you were marrying a Lamanite. What made you think that? Was that noted in the Mormon Church? Like, I mean, was that brought up? I mean,
Yeah, in the Book of Mormon.
Like you're marrying somebody who's been cursed with. I mean, like, what made you think that? Because that's kind of a weird thought that you say in this blessed moment in the temple.
Well, what it is that in the Book of Mormon we're taught that Lehi was a prophet in Jerusalem, and he took his whole family and crossed to the Americas. And once they got here to the Americas, there's one group that they called the Nephites, which were the good descendants of Lehi, and then he had a son named Laman. And Laman's posterity became wicked. And so in the Book of Mormon, it says that the Nephites were white and delightsome, and those that followed Laman, the wicked brother, became dark. And so to me, at the time that I married her, I thought, well, she is Native American, so she came from Jerusalem, her ancestors came from Jerusalem, and they were what they call Lamanites from the Book of Mormon. So my pride was that she was part of the people of the Book of Mormon.
So you thought you were marrying a partial Jewish person of descent or something.
Any other questions? Did you guys get your name removed?
Yeah, that day that I told her, I took my resignation to the bishop, but it still took him 3 months.
And Carmen?
I have not done that yet. For a while there, I thought, oh, it doesn't matter, you know, it doesn't count anyway. As long as my name is in the book of life, in God's book, that's. But I'm thinking now, you know, that I'm just gonna have it removed so it doesn't, so I'm not one of the numbers out there in the church. You know. But right now I haven't.
Have you guys been baptized into a Christian church?
Yes. I was baptized 2 years ago on Easter. And a little bit chilly, and the baptismal font we had, we joined the, once again, I don't believe this is a true church. I was baptized where I was comfortable, which was the Anchor Baptist Church. And they had a mobile font that they set up the night before, and they turned on the heater, but during the night the circuit breaker popped, and so I got into very cold water, but was very joyously baptized. Then Carmen was baptized about a year later, right? And she chose to be baptized in this pond near our home. And so we set up, there's a picnic area there too. So when Baptists get together, there's food involved. So we had a big old potluck set up on the tables out there, and we were on the shore, and she walked out with the pastor to be baptized. And as she was baptized and came out of the water, the sprinkler system came on, and all the rest of us got sprinkled. So she was baptized. She was dunked, and we were sprinkled.
How long were you a Mormon altogether?
About 50 years. Yeah. A little over 50, I think. Yeah.
Did the bishop and stake president try and reach out to you to come back? They ever try and answer those questions that you have?
My 4 questions, no. But can I tell about your home teacher?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Her home teacher showed up to the house. I'm already out of the church. She's still a member. And he says, I'm actually here to talk to your wife. Well, I wasn't going to let him talk to my wife. So I sat down on the couch next to her, and he started talking to her. And he said that his biggest fear was that he would not live a worthy enough life so that when it came to bring his wife through the veil that they do in the temple into the celestial kingdom, that he wouldn't be there and another man would have to do it. And that, you know, she would belong to another man. And after he left, I says, honey, do you realize what he was just doing? I'm not going to be going on the side of that veil. I said, he was proposing to you.
I have to tell you how touched that I was to hear again how God reaches out. It's so, I mean, He really blessed me tonight.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
It was awesome.
Hope
God
we
is
bless
awesome.
our kids too.
Well, since we've got everybody here, I hope that in your prayers that you will remember our children, our 6 children, that their hearts will be softened however God sees fit to do so, to bring them to the joy that Carmen and I feel in the real Jesus. He's so much greater than the Jesus of Mormonism. He's not our older brother, he's our God. And he loved us so much that he...
He's much bigger than I ever thought. When he first used to tell me, don't you want to get to know, you know, the true Christ? I said, what do you mean the true Christ? I have Christ, you know. I know him. He says, but I mean the true Jesus. I didn't understand what he was talking about, you know.
Earlier when she mentioned that I would whisper in her ear, as she was going to sleep. What I was quoting was Matthew 7:21, 22, 23. And she'd be falling asleep, and I'd say, and Jesus will say, I never knew you.
Real subtle, real subtle.
Yeah.
Subliminal messaging.
Just out of curiosity, in your own personal opinion, what do you think it is that drives the Mormon Church to continue to do to people what it does?
I believe, and I think my wife does too, because she said, well, do you want to tell them about when you had your 1-year anniversary of your baptism, what you told the Baptist congregation?
When I reached my 1 year of being baptized, I was asked to bear my testimony. And so I get up there to share my testimony after leaving the Mormon Church, and so I'm bearing my testimony that now that I finally know the true Christ in the Bible, and how grateful and thankful I am that He helped me come to see His truth, and now I know who is the head of the Mormon Church. It's not Christ, it's not God, it's Satan himself. Ahead of the Mormon Church. Never thought I'd ever say something like that, but now I know it's true.
And to answer your question, what I think that their motivation is, as she said, Satan is the one that is guiding it. And you see, their motivation, I believe, is money. But I spent my career as a pilot. And when you leave a destination to go, like, say, Los Angeles to Florida, if you're flying along there and you're just 1 degree off, by the time you get to the other coast, you are hundreds of miles off of the course. And Satan knew that if he told people, come join my church and worship me, the devil, that no one would join the Mormon Church. So the Mormon people are good people, but they've been duped. They're misguided. And it's that one, Satan will lead you down that path just 1 degree off. By the time you get to the destination, you're way off course.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
That is a good one.
Yeah, so that's how he does it.
And he's the one who started not reading the Bible, because he knew exactly, once you read that Bible, hey, he knows. And that's...
Reading the Bible gets us back on course.
Yeah.
That's a mistake the church is making now, having people read the Bible more. I think.
And it's funny now too, because the church has made so many changes. And one Sunday we had this one lady from the Mormon Church come in our church, and she's way in the back, just writing things, whatever she's hearing, being taught. And at the end of the service, when they found out that she was a Mormon, they came to us and, hey, there's a Mormon here, maybe you want to go talk to her. So we did. We go over there and we introduced ourselves, and sure enough, she gave us a card that she goes around visiting other Christian churches. And so, but she didn't give us enough time to ask her anything, She was out of that door, and later on we thought, she was there taking notes on how Christians do things. And then they take it back, and now we see all these changes taking place. I go, exactly what Christians do, So.
Okay, well, let's close it up here. Russ, would you close us in prayer?
I'd love to. Dear Lord God in heaven, Carmen and I are so grateful that we've had this beautiful, wonderful day today. to be able to share our testimonies with all these lovely Christians. But the first things that I would like to have come out of our mouths is that we are all so grateful, Lord, that you came down, paid for our sins on the cross, even when we were enemies, that you loved us so much that you saved us. We thank you for that. We're thankful that we, as Christians, get together and share in the joy of your true gospel and love for each one of us. We're thankful that everyone that was here tonight was so lovely with us and to share their testimonies. We'd like to pray also at this time for unspoken prayers. We'd like to pray for our Mormon brothers and sisters. And Carmen and I especially like to lift up our children to you. Only you can supply the miracle of bringing them to the true Jesus. This I pray in your holy name, amen.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.